You need to believe the best. Focus on the positive. Look on the bright side. But is there a toxic side to positivity? Absolutely. So when does positivity become toxic? That's what we're going to talk about today. When we take positivity, it can do three things and become toxic. The first one is we can use positivity as denial. We can use positivity to not accept what is true and not be honest with ourselves. We can actually gaslight ourselves. If you've heard of gaslighting, we usually use it in reference to another person, basically questioning our reality and making us believe things that are completely not true and making us feel like we're crazy. But when I'm talking about gaslighting ourselves, it's basically we can use positivity to not see what is true and to change our reality to the point where it can really harm us. And that's what I'm talking about. We can use positivity regularly at the expense of truth. The challenge of that is it brings to number two. It can be a problem by having us avoid and not take ownership of our lives. And that's kind of like leaning on a shovel and praying for a hole. And it's interesting how we can use positivity in prayer as a very destructive combination, where we're trusting in God and believing in God to change things and to move, which honestly, I'm all about that. But we can do it in a way where we're not taking ownership of things and where we're relying on God in a way that He's like, I've created you as my hands and feet. I've given you volition and free will. And those are things that He wants us to use. And so that's how positivity can keep us from avoiding taking ownership. And then third, it is outright dangerous. So how can it be dangerous? Well, let me tell you, you have to be a pretty positive person to get into an abusive relationship. Because as a positive person, we are likely not to see red flags. There's a number of other things that can create that, but genuinely positive people really struggle with red flags. They believe the best. They make excuses, things like that, all out of positivity. Another thing, when we're overly positive, we can be not listening to our bodies in a relationship. We can be like, our bodies will tell us. It'll be like, yeah, what he's saying is not in alignment. Our body can actually speak to us in that way. But if we're overly positive and disconnected, which happens when you're toxically positive, we're not hearing those messages. We're not heeding those messages. We're disconnected. And that can create a lot of challenges. And so it's easier to get into an abusive relationship as an overly positive person or a toxically positive person. And it's easier to stay in abusive relationships as a toxically positive person because we have toxic hope and we just believe things are going to get better, whether we have in our mind it's going to get better with time or it's going to get better with whatever we say. Like, oh, it'll get better when he's less stressed. It's going to get better, when the kids are a little bit older. Things like that. So we can make these very positive stories and it'd be very destructive to us and dangerous, but our positivity is turned to a toxic positivity. We can also have an image and our idea in our brains about the relationship that's completely not true. Like, for example, I was talking to a client recently, and she had in her mind that she had been in this relationship of the love of her life, but yet it was very abusive. And when I asked her more about it, I realized she was in love with a positive version that she had formed about this guy. Like, we're going to do this together. He's that type of person. We're going to do that. But in reality, that is not what was going on at all or ever. For me, I did the same thing because I was previously married for 22 years and it was abusive emotionally, religiously, psychologically. It led to a lot of physical health problems and then mental health problems. And my perpetual positive belief is that if I just worked harder and made him happier, then he would be that person he was when we dated. And that was a lie. It was a toxic positive idea that wasn't true. And I had been love bombed when we dated, so that wasn't even who he was. But I had positively reframed it in order to stay in it. And it was not good on my body. So some of the problems other than, what I just mentioned, as far as like, it's denial, avoidance, and it's dangerous, it can cause other problems for us as humans. So what happens if we're toxically positive is it's very easy to create masks. Like we always have to smile and look on the bright side. But the truth is that's not real. And so that's creating like a false identity or a false look. And it's hard to connect with people when we are not being authentic or honest. And in that sort of situation, when we're alone with ourselves, that doesn't feel good because it's very hard to keep those masks up when we're alone because we all know ourselves. Another thing is, like I mentioned, it can lead to a dishonesty, which leads to inaction. And this idea is really things do get worse over time. 99% of the time, relationships get worse over time if we're not investing in it in a healthy way rather than just an overly slap positivity on it and hope for the best. Another big thing, and this is what I alluded to in my own situation, is the body keeps the score. There's a cost to this. Because when we are not looking at reality and being dishonest and having harmful things happen to us and not working through that, it will create a dissonance with us and creates the physical challenges. I had a lot of sickness, all sorts of sicknesses, like a list, which is, I think is so interesting. I noticed that Dr. Amen came out with his new book, and it has to do with pain and emotions. And a lot of our pain has an emotional component. And, another one that really gets into this is Cure for Chronic Pain by Nicole Sachs. And she talks a lot about how basically our body is really scared about the emotional pain. And so it'll be much happier giving us physical chronic pain in order to distract us from actually feeling our feelings and doing the emotional pain. And we can actually alleviate so much pain by doing the work on ourselves, which is like so amazing. And I'm so glad those two people are getting this message out even more, because there's a huge cost to toxic positivity and not dealing with real things and not creating a dishonesty with ourselves. I also mentioned The Body Keeps the Score. That's actually a book, and a psychiatrist, that is a mind-blowing book. It's a deep read, but it really talks about how our body is keeping score of our true thoughts and feelings and our pain and also our trauma. And so it can cause so many problems. So that's a really good book too. And I'm just thankful that this message is getting out more and more. Are you feeling stuck in with love, wealth, or peace? Well, you're not alone. Often it's a subconscious belief holding you back. That's why I combined life coaching and hypnotherapy together, so you can break through what's been keeping you stuck. Life coaching helps you shift your mindset, while hypnotherapy works deep within to reprogram limiting beliefs and memories. It's fast, it's effective, typically one session of each, and I have a few openings left. Are you ready for a change? Visit livebrighter.info and book your free consultation and see if this approach is right for you. See you then. So like I alluded to, having toxic positivity keeps us disconnected from ourselves and from our body. And that's a consequence because we're not meant to be disconnected with ourselves and our body. So what's the solution to toxic positivity? Well, first, we need to learn to name and feel all our feelings. And we use that as information. And it's so important to give an example of that because like naming our feelings is still a very cognitive thing. For example, oh gosh, I think this is shame. This feels like shame. But what I mean by feeling our feelings is really like, oh my goodness, I'm feeling hot in the face. I'm feeling like embarrassed. I'm feeling like I want to run, get away. This is shame. And then just sitting with that feeling, like just looking at it in our bodies and feeling the hotness and just looking at it and then getting curious and just saying, okay, I see you, shame. What do you, after you're done feeling it, because it literally will pass through you in like 90 seconds. And that is so healthy to learn this. After we're feeling it, then asking the shame and realizing it's just trying to give us information, being like, what do you want to tell me? Like, what are you trying to tell me? But not before you sit with the actual feeling and process it within our bodies. Another one is jealousy. I mean, all of our feelings have like something bodily and that's in our bodies because all of our feelings have energy. and we're energetic beings. That's because we're human and alive. So another one is like jealousy. Like jealousy, I'll feel like this, like maybe a burning in my chest and an empty, like a hole. And when I go in my body, I can just see kind of this darkness and like this kind of soul suckingness. And, again, if I just feel the feeling rather than judging it and being like, oh my goodness, you should not feel jealous. That is so unchristian of you. Any of those things, just being like, wow, I'm feeling jealousy. And then just like feeling it in my body, allowing it to process through me, and then just being curious. It's like, well, what is that? What is it trying to tell me? Oh, it's trying to tell me that those are things that are important to me. And rather than comparing, I need to work towards those things in time. So it's so important to learn to feel our feelings and to use them as information, but take the time to go in our bodies and sit with them. And it can be super uncomfortable. But the amount of strength, resilience, and self-confidence we get from the ability to feel all of our feelings is huge, because as human, we are going to feel all of them. Shame and worthiness, all of them. Doesn't mean that we have to live in them. And if we don't process them, they'll live in us. So that's not good. So first of all, learn and feel our feelings. Second one is deciding that we are not the victim, meaning we created our life by all of our choices and where we're at now, and just taking ownership, allowing ourselves to actually create our lives, and which cannot happen unless we take ownership for it. We can't be relying on somebody else, relying on, God to do all the action, which he's powerful and amazing, and source is amazing. But again, he's given us a big responsibility here. And our first responsibility is to ourselves to take care of this. And so really just deciding not to be the victim, and then deciding to create. And then the third thing is getting honest with ourselves. And this is a big deal. So instead of gaslighting ourselves, really getting honest with ourselves, which if you've been in a perpetual state of not doing this, it's a whole new world to be able to do this. And I have to say, I was fabulous at being dishonest with myself, and I still struggle with it at times. And so I'm regularly checking in. It's like, what am I not wanting to actually admit? What am I trying to hide from myself? And so I feel like the best way to be honest with ourselves, there's lots of good ways, but it's the BARF notebook. So I created the Unravel notebook, the whole book, which is a wonderful resource on Amazon. But part of that is called the BARF plan. And you can get it on my website, which is livebrighter.info. It's a free resource. And basically, it's a process that gets us trained to literally barf out all of our thoughts and feelings as they really are, and not judging ourselves. So in my BARF notebook, like literally, it's cussing and angry. It's awful. Like I would never let people like read it. I'm not. And then the wonderful thing about the BARF notebook process is it gives you a way to like feel it, barf it out, sort it out, plan it out. That's the BARF notebook process. And the wonderful thing is then you just toss the paper away. But that honesty with ourselves and feeling our feelings fully is so powerful on our physical health, our mental health, our spiritual health. Very powerful. So just getting honest and then being curious as we're going through the BARF notebook process, it's like feeling the feelings honestly, and then just getting curious and asking questions like, what am I avoiding right now? Like, what am I avoiding knowing about? How do I really feel about my relationship? How do I really feel about my friendships? How do I really feel about my job? I think some people don't want to be honest because they think they have to take action, which you don't. You can be like, okay, I find my job very depleting, very this and that. And that's okay to be honest. It doesn't mean you have to take action, because there could be a reason why you're like, it is, but at this point is a great stepping stone to where I want to be, and it offers me this, and I'm willing to choose that. But that's so different. Choosing it is very different than a dishonesty with ourselves and just going through the motions, which is what happens when we get disconnected from ourselves, is going through the motions and hinders us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So get honest and take inventory. And it's okay, again, like I said, not to take action. So those are the tools in order to go past toxic positivity. So it's learn to feel your feelings and name them and understand them. 2, decide not to be the victim and take ownership and create your life. And 3, get honest. Get honest. So it's super important to be trained in positivity, train our minds in positivity and gratitude, because our brains are negative by nature. And that's just saying that it's meant to protect us. And so it's going to look at the problems. And so if we're not careful, we can train it to be just negative all the time. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, there's the other side of the spectrum where we're just swirling and rolling in negativity. So there is something super powerful about training ourselves in positivity and gratitude. Like I start off every morning with gratefulness, but we can't use gratitude as a toxic positivity either to be like, oh, that's, we can do the same problem with that and make it toxic as well. So we can do those things, but we have to accept reality. Something that's really important is to know life is a mixture. I've had some people say, really, it's a mixture of 50-50%, meaning that there's things that happen to us, all of us as humans at some point in our lives that are terrible and wrong and feel awful. We're all going to experience like heartache, health challenges, people dying. It's part of our human experience, our journey. I always call it like we're on Earth School. So what are we learning in Earth School today? But having this idea that we shouldn't have problems and that everything should be positive, that can really harm us. So understanding life is a mixture. Our feelings are a mixture. And that life isn't necessarily meant to be happy all the time, because that's not even healthy. And we can create joy, we can create happiness, but not at the expense of dishonesty, disconnection, and harming ourselves, which is toxic positivity. So there's a lot of suffering that happens when we resist uncomfortable feelings or uncomfortable truths. And resisting is just like, I don't want to think about it, I don't want to hear about it, I'm just not going to deal with it. And it's so funny, I definitely see my tendency to do that. And so I constantly being like, no, we can do hard things. We can feel uncomfortable emotions. We can see things as they are. We can decide. And we can do all of this. So we can be a positive person and we can be honest with ourselves at the same time. And that is an authentic person. And those are my people. And I hope that is who you are too. There's a lot of peace that comes with being honest with ourselves and honest with others. And it's a great way to connect, because we cannot connect with people if we're toxically positive, if we're not really willing to deal or see real things and feel real things. So super important to connect. So I like to end with just some time to ourselves. I mean, I feel like this world is so busy and full of a lot of information. And the most important information and what you have comes from within yourself. So I always want to come back as much as I can and have you listen to yourself, because that's what's most important. So let's just take a pause, and we're going to take a deep breath in. And always just do a belly breath in. That's huge. And then breathe out slowly. And then take a deep breath in, belly breath, and breathe out slowly. And just give yourself some gratitude for even doing the work of listening to this podcast, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're trying to grow. And we're in that same living brighter 1% at a time. So just take another deep breath, give yourself some gratitude and congratulation, and breathe out. And then answer this question in your mind. What is one thing that comes to your mind that you're not being honest to about yourself? And just see what comes up in your mind. And then just take that, because now might not be the time to deal with that. Take that and then take 5 minutes today and do the barf notebook process. Again, you can get that on my website for free. And my website's livebrighter.info. And love yourself in that way, to be honest with yourself. It can be an uncomfortable process, and you can either do hard now or harder later, because our body does keep the score and it does affect us, and there is a cost. And what I really want for you, and I really want for me, is that we just live brighter 1% at a time. So make it a great day and take care. Stay tuned for our next episode.